Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today my quarterly book haul. As the name implies, I do a book haul every 3 months because I usually don't buy enough books all at once to justify a book haul video, but I figure I accumulate enough every 3 months where it makes it a fun time. Now, there is a little bit of an exception with this one because I did do a book haul video uh, earlier this month or last month because I made a very large bulk purchase of Buffy the Vampire Slayer novels. I bought 22 of them. So I did a separate video for those already. I'm not going to rehash them in this one. If you're interested in the Buffy books, check out that video. I go over them and just like read the backs of them in depth. So if you're a Buffy fan, might be really interesting for you. So this is going to be my book haul of everything from July, August, and September that was not a Buffy the Vampire Slayer novel. So we'll go ahead and I'll kick off. The first book I've got here is Dangerous Women 1. This is a short story collection edited by George R. Martin and Gardner Dozois? I don't know. But includes short stories by Carrie Vaughn, Megan Lindholm, Lawrence Block, Joe R. Lansdale, Megan Abbott, and Cecilia Holland, as well as an original novella by George R. R. Martin set in the Song of Ice and Fire series. So I got this primarily for that Song of Ice and Fire novella. I still have not gotten around to reading this yet. I have no recollection whatsoever of where I bought this book. I know I bought it secondhand somewhere, but cannot for the life of me remember under what circumstances I did so. Next up, I've got One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. Kesey? I don't know how to pronounce anyone's last name so far. But I read this a long time ago. I already know that I enjoy it, or at least I enjoyed it then. I love the movie with Jack Nicholson. So I figured why not get another copy just because I wanted to read it again. I was a little curious. Um, haven't actually reread it yet, but now that I have it, I will at some point. Got this at a yard sale, I think, for probably $1. So can't go wrong there. Next up, I've got the novelization of the movie Scarface. So this is a novel by Paul Monette, based on the screenplay by Oliver Stone. I'm actually not a huge fan of the movie Scarface. I think it's like really over the top, and I know that that's kind of the point of it. Brian De Palma as a director is hit and miss for me. I don't like a lot of his stuff, but there are some things that I really do enjoy, like Carrie or Phantom of the Paradise. But a lot of his more commonly famous stuff, like Scarface or The Untouchables, I'm not a huge fan of. But I was at an estate sale. This was like a quarter, so I figured why not? I might save this for next Garb August because I mean it looks like it'll really fit that bill really perfectly. So that's Scarface. Another movie novelization, and this one I've already read and reviewed on the channel, and that's Alien by Alan Dean Foster, based on the screenplay by Dan O'Bannon, obviously the movie by Ridley Scott. Really, really enjoyed this. It was a very different experience than the Alien movie. This is much more so, in my opinion, a science fiction novel than it is a horror novel. And it just added a different perspective to the events of that movie, which we all know so well because it's such a classic. So just like to flesh it out a little bit more from a technical perspective, from an interpersonal perspective, this was really interesting. I encourage you to check out my full review of this for my complete thoughts. Next up, and that was it. This is a Barnes and Noble purchase. This is a novelization from the 70s that's so famous that they're still reprinting it to this day. This one, Speaks the Nightbird by Robert McCammon. This is Speaks the Nightbird, Volume 1, Judgment of the Witch. So this is like a newer Robert McCammon book. I don't know that it's even horror. It's set in 1699, and it seems like it's like, I don't know. Seems interesting. I think it's more of just like a mystery or something. I haven't really heard much about it. I'm in the middle of reading McCammon's older horror stuff, so this one's probably going to take a back seat to those before I get to this one. But this I got at a book trader store in New Jersey. It was pretty cheap, so I was able to get that secondhand. Next, Swamp Thing. This is the novelization of the movie, the Wes Craven movie from 1982. This is written by David Houston and Len Wein. I put up a really fun video on this book where I review this and the movie and the comics adaptation of the movie. And I just talk about the good things about each, the things that didn't work so well about each of them. I had a lot of fun making that video, so I really encourage you to check that out. Even if you're not a Swamp Thing fan, it's just a fun little media dissection, seeing the same story in 3 different mediums and just how they have to change it to make it work. It's pretty cool. This was a pretty good book. I'll give you a spoiler. I think that this is the best version of that Swamp Thing 1982. And it was really a lot of fun. I just grabbed this one off eBay just because I needed it and I didn't want to wait until I encountered it in the wild. Next up, another book I've reviewed on the channel, Ring by Koji Suzuki. I was disappointed by this book. I explain in my full review that it's very, very hard to separate this book from the adaptations of it. Either the original Japanese movie or the American remake, particularly the American remake, which I think is the best rendition of the story. I don't know if that's considered blasphemy or not, but I do think that it is the best version of the story, and it's a lot better than this. Like, it's just a lot more interesting, and it's a lot more leaning into the horror aspect. This is much more of like a detective story than anything, or more investigation, I should say. It's not bad. It's just that when you've already seen the movies, this pales in comparison, in my opinion. And feel free to let me know if you disagree with that. And that was another new book, just Barnes & Noble. I had a gift card, so I sprung for it. This one was another eBay purchase, The Wolfen by Whitley Strieber. I had this one on my radar for a while because it was recommended by Stephen Graham Jones. I went to an event with Stephen Graham Jones in February, and I asked him about his influences. He mentioned this book, and I definitely see it. After reading this, I see it, especially for his book Mongrels. You can definitely see where he was influenced. This is a really impressive book. I really, really enjoyed it. I have a review of it up on the channel. There's a number of different covers available for this one. I specifically chose this one, even though this copy is a little bit kind of beat up, a little bit warped. I chose it because it was the only one available that had this cover on it, because it's my favorite one of the options available. And this is just a really interesting werewolf story. It's not just like about a group of people who discover werewolves or encounter werewolves. Suddenly they're fighting for their lives. It's a police procedural in which they are investigating crimes that happen to be perpetrated by a group of werewolves. And that perspective, that angle towards the story is really interesting. Next up, this was another Barnes & Noble purchase, Cibola Burn by James S.A. Corey, the 4th book in the Expanse series. I am really looking forward to continuing this series because I've loved the first 3. And it's been taking me forever to get the next installment, so I just bit the bullet and finally got it. So I've got it now. I don't know if I'm going to read it in October because I really want to dedicate October to like only spooky stuff. But I also might get bored of spooky stuff after a little bit and just want to just breeze through this one because they're such easy reads, even though they're so thick. But yeah, Cibola Burn by James S.A. Corey. Another one, this was the 3rd Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter book, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Sanderson. And I loved this book. This was a beautiful book. Not quite as good as Tress of the Emerald Sea, in my opinion, but right up there as one of Sanderson's strongest efforts. Really lovely love story. I think it's his strongest love story yet, and a fun fantasy world, a fun premise, and really, of all the books that I got this quarter, the nicest one, just like presentation wise. It's really nice binding, nice like faux leather. Love the I don't, what is this embossing? The embossing, I guess. It just looks great. The spine looks great. There's illustrations inside that look great. Just a great package overall. Really, that Kickstarter by Sanderson, even though the second book stunk, it's already been worth the price of admission. Actually, what October? We're coming up on October. The fourth book should be coming in the mail soon. Well, that's exciting to look forward to. All right. Next up, a new release. Pre-ordered it from Barnes and Noble. The Beast You Are stories by Paul Tremblay. I love Paul Tremblay. One of my favorite authors working right now. I was hoping for a big bounce back after Paul Bearer's Club, which I did not like at all. This was pretty good. Short story collections are hit and miss typically. There's some really great stuff in here. There's also some stuff that, you know, isn't going to resonate with you that didn't resonate with me. But worth a read. I also really like the cover on this one. I love the jacket design. I love the color palette of just like maroon and yellow. I think it's a really solid color pairing. Next up, from the same estate sale that I got that Scarface book from, it's Michael Crichton's The Lost World. This is a first edition of the sequel. Was able to, again, to get it for like a quarter, which is really neat. I really love Jurassic Park. That book is so good. I've read this once. It's not as good, but it is still a really good book. And I like the cover. This is one of those ones where I probably could have passed on it, but it just looks nice on the shelf. Honestly, I like the dinosaur bone silhouette. It's a neat looking book, and again, it was a quarter. How could you turn that down? It's just really nice. And the last prose novel, I've got some graphic novels here as well. The last prose novel that I acquired this quarter, which I was really excited about. I got this from that book trader in New Jersey. This is Stephen King's The Stand. This is the first edition of the complete uncut version, which I've always wanted a copy of this because I've always wanted a copy with this cover on it. It's such an iconic cover. And when I saw this sitting there, the price was very right. And even though I didn't necessarily really have the space for it on my shelf, I just made it work because I've always wanted a copy of this one. I've read The Stand several times. It is terrific. It's such a good book. I don't know if I ever read it again, which I probably will at one day. I don't know that I would read the hardcover because I don't know that my hands could take it. But this is another good, just like bookshelf mainstay display piece, which you can't discredit that. You know, it's completely valid to buy books for the aesthetic. I don't mind that. I know that there's maybe some people who say, if you're going to buy a book, you got to read it. No, if you're going to buy a book just for the look of it, go for it. Do it. There's so much judgment in this world. Just do whatever you want. Just do whatever makes you feel good, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. All right, what else we got here? So moving into graphic novels. Very recent acquisition, because this just came out. This is the soft cover of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics by Tom Scioli. I've already read this one. I read it a long time ago. I'm a huge Jack Kirby mark. I think he is the greatest comic creator of all time. And Stan Lee would have been nothing without him. There, I said it. And this is a really great account of Jack Kirby's life and his career in comics. The art is really solid. The storytelling is really great from Scioli. So if you're interested in comics history and learning more about the real mastermind behind the Marvel Universe, definitely check out this book. Scioli just released, on the same date that the softcover came out, he released Stan Lee's his Stan Lee book. I don't remember the full name of it, but that one is supposed to be really good as well. It's supposed to be a fair look at the history. Like, a lot of times when you have a big Jack Kirby fan like myself, there's a bias against Stan Lee to just kind of bury him and say that he took all the credit. He kind of did. But apparently that book is seeing both sides of things. So I am curious to pick that one up. I just haven't gotten it yet. Next up, Summer Blonde by Adrian Tomina. Last year, I got Tomina's Sleepwalk and Other Stories, these are collections from his independent comic series, Optic Nerve. So Sleepwalk and Other Stories was the first 4 issues of that. This is the next 4 issues, I believe. And Sleepwalk, that book ended up being my favorite graphic novel that I read in 2022. I loved it. I adored it. It's amazing. And if you've never read it, you have to. You have to. And I've read Summer Blonde now, and I can say with certainty, Adrian Tomina is an incredible writer. Incredible writer that writes these beautiful, believable, relatable characters. Like every character in his stories are just super typical. They are just typical people. And even if the situations that they're in aren't completely relatable, the way that they react to those situations is relatable and believable. And it's very understated, and it's very bittersweet. And he doesn't provide a lot of closure at the ends of his stories, so it can be frustrating. But it's just he writes such honest, beautiful comics. And I need to go to my comic shop and find something else by him, because I want to read more and more. And from what I could tell from his bibliography, there's not nearly enough of it. So if it's not obvious, I love this. I don't know that I loved it as much as Sleepwalk and Other Stories, but it's probably going to be on my list again of top graphic novels for the year. Something very different. Don Simpson's X Amount of Comics, the 1963 When Else Annual. It's a bit of a mouthful. This is a super niche comic because you need to have a very deep well of knowledge about comics history to understand what the hell is going on here and what this is referencing. And I don't know, should I go into it now? Let me try to give the spark notes. So in the 90s, Alan Moore wrote a 6-issue series for Image Comics called 1963. And each issue was its own standalone thing in the style of Silver Age Marvel comics. They were riffing on them in some way. Featured incredible art by Steve Bissette, Rick Veitch, and Don Simpson. And the series was supposed to culminate in this massive annual that was going to be drawn by Jim Lee and written by Alan Moore, where all of the disparate stories kind of connected and folded into the current Image universe. And it never happened. It never came to fruition. So that series is famously unfinished. Since then, Don Simpson and basically everyone else that's ever worked with Alan Moore has fallen out with Alan Moore. He's a very difficult person, I guess, to finish working with. So as a very much kind of tongue-in-cheek or a not-so-subtle middle finger, Don Simpson has published this completely unauthorized version of the 1963 annual. So this is his conclusion to the story. I haven't read it yet. I've started it. I haven't gotten fully through it yet, but it's very funny. The cartooning is great, and it's very critical of Alan Moore. It's very interesting. Just completely fearless depiction of Alan Moore, I would say, considering how beloved of a comic writer he is. So if you are interested in that side of comic history, that's an interesting book to check out. And finally, the last book, and definitely the biggest book I've gotten size-wise in terms of dimension, but kind of a weird one. This is another Kickstarter book, Faust, Love of the Damned, the complete collection by David Quinn and Tim Vigil. I have a sticky note on here because there is a boob on the cover. This is underground outlaw comics at its finest. Faust is renowned for being incredibly bloody and having just a ton of nudity and sex, and just being overall just like kind of gross. I love Tim Vigil's artwork. Yeah, I think he's a fantastic artist, and what he chooses to do with his talent is draw some depraved stuff. So they did a Kickstarter of putting together this amazing oversized hardcover collection of the series. I had to have it, even though I've never read it completely through. I've read the first issue only. So I plan to read this in October because it's perfect for October. Uh, I've already flipped through it. I know I enjoy it for the artwork. I'll see how the story goes. But regardless, just having this edition, a big oversized edition of Tim Vigil's artwork, is really, really cool. There is a regular edition of this book coming out, I think, in October. But I don't need that because I've got this one. But if you're interested in Faust, keep an eye out for that at your local comic shop. So that's it. That is my quarterly book haul for Q3 of 2023. I'll do another one of these at the end of the year. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you saw anything that you liked, if you recommend anything. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.